Connor is a versatile content creator and producer at All the Smoke Productions, a spin-off from the former Showtime Sports department under Paramount. With extensive experience in sports media, Connor has played a key role in driving audience growth and engagement by creating impactful short-form content that supports long-form programming. So notably, his efforts have grown KG's certified's Instagram following from 35K to 400K and contributed to over 1.2 million pay-per-view buys for the Gervonta Davis versus Ryan Garcia fight through innovative social media strategies. So today we have Connor. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me on.
Absolutely. This is good. I look forward to having this conversation, Connor. First and foremost, tell us what's happening in the industry. What are you afraid of? What are you excited about?
So, I mean, as with every single year, the industry is ever changing and constantly trying to keep up with, new ways to present content, new ways to program content. It really makes your head spin, but that is kind of a fear as well as something I'm excited about, right? So, with everything changing and with new projects coming along, with new ways to present content, with the use of AI, it does get kind of scary in terms of how will we need the bodies that we've had previously? Will we need the talent that we've had previously? But then at the same time, I'm hopeful that things such as AI will actually just help, right? And will help create better content for all of us.
Absolutely. I think it just allows a whole lot of efficiency so you can focus on the stuff that you want to work on and not really forced to work on. Um, Connor, what is, other than AI, making life a lot easier in terms of competing with competition or even making more progress than you ever could?
Well, I mean, with AI, one of the biggest things where it does help where in those efficiencies that you're talking about is just output. Because one way that the industry has pivoted, especially in terms of short form programming and social media content, is quantity. But the issue is we don't really want to lose the quality that we've previously had, right?
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
the pages and the programming that you see grow, they grow a lot of times because of the sheer amount of content that they're sharing, which is great, which is awesome. But at the same time, that does get watered down to a degree. And it becomes apparent that there's less effort putting in behind it, which is one thing that at our production company we really try to kind of push back against to a degree. We try to really have produced content that is going to be eye appealing, that is going to be very attention grabbing. And that's not to say a 20-second clip that's obviously thrown together by AI where the framing's off, where the audio's clicking, where things aren't smoothed out doesn't appeal to the larger audience because of course it does, and that's why those pages are growing. But we're really trying to kind of push back against that and really try to produce our content. And AI and the efficiencies that they allow has helped us up the quantity, but while also trying to keep the heart of like what makes the content appealing to the audience.
Absolutely. Now, the science of engagement with the audience is forever the same. Tell me, Connor, what do you think might change as trends come and go with regards to how you cut, edit, post on socials?
For sure. Well, one of the biggest things is kind of what I touched on, honestly, is in the past, like I remember even a few years ago, you might have social media content that, pieces could go from 2 to 4 minutes. And like the attention would be there and you would see similar engagement, whether it be commenting, whether it be reactions, likes, and all that, shares, saves, and bookmarks, you would see that engagement. In recent times, anything that starts to kind of creep over that 2.5, 3 minute mark, unless it's very, very engaging for the entire duration of said clip or whatever it is, it doesn't get the same kind of movement inside of the Instagram algorithm, the TikTok algorithm. Everything needs to be shorter and more concise, right? So we're really trying to aim for that that minute to 2 minute highly engaging content.
And do you find that this is a trend that's still going forward? Because I often hear um, over these conversations that YouTube is now pushing that long form as well. So is that like maybe a disparity there between two types of audiences, or what's happening there?
I think there definitely is, and YouTube's a good example because at the same time that they're pushing their long forms, and you do see certain whether it be like Theo Von, Joe Rogan, that they will push out 4 hour long podcasts, which do incredible engagement. YouTube also introduced YouTube Shorts, right? So they saw a space where they were missing out on that shorter form content. And YouTube Shorts for the longest time, just until this past fall, topped out at a minute. So like in the old TikTok kind of format where you could not go over 60 seconds. Now they've expanded it to 3 minutes, but there is a disparity in terms of what like a YouTube will look for and what like an Instagram will look for. And that's kind of why the the social media platforms of like an Instagram, a TikTok, as far as we go and as far as a lot of media companies, production companies go, we use those as tools to help drive back to the YouTube side, right? So we're using that minute and a half clip on TikTok to just push back to the long form YouTube to get engagement there. So basically trying to double dip engagement, getting the social, short attention span, and then hopefully through our super engaging content, they go, okay, let me go see what else is going on in this fuller episode.
Interesting. Please walk us through that. Like, is this part of repurposing some of the content, or is this because repurposing, like before, is just not enough? Like, for example, you have this YouTube video, cut it for Instagram, cut it for TikTok. Now, all these platforms demand their own type of content. So walk us through that as well. How do you deal with that?
So the way we deal with that most is creating all different sorts of mediums, right? So whether it's graphics and swipe throughs with just graphics, so it's just reading. Say we're putting out an episode on a famous boxer from the 80s. We might have a swipe through graphic that has no video aspects at all, right? Still highly engaging, but will be refreshing and facts about said boxer, which is just another way to create content. At the same time, when we're on set, we're shooting social specific video with our guests, with our talent. So that's something that wouldn't be seen in the long form YouTube video. So it might be
Mm,
something where we're asking more, not necessarily personal questions, but just to stay with the boxing. If it's a boxer who had 36, 40 knockouts in his career, maybe it's something as simple as asking, what was your favorite knockout and why? Can you walk us through that? That's something that won't necessarily get into the long form nitty gritty conversation, but it's something that we can then overlay incredible highlights, caption and stuff like that. So it's very, very social specific. It's something that's not actually repurposed from the long form, but it does again pique the audience to saying, you know what, I want to hear more of X fighter sit down with, one of our hosts, Andre Ward, who's a Hall of Fame boxer. I want to see him sit down with Andre Ward and see what he really has to say about the nitty gritty of his career. And that's all coming from something that we shot separately just on an iPhone that has nothing to do with what's contained within the long form itself.
gotcha. Interesting. And I think part of that's always going to change with the trends and the algorithms. Um, but Connor, with your tasks every single day, your role, does it change every day, or is it largely the same what you do?
It changes a lot every single day. I'm a senior social producer, so social in the title, but at the same time, I'm helping to produce the longer form content that you're seeing. I'll be on the ground as a social media producer, so I'll be coming up with questions for the guests and for the talent, like I just mentioned, in terms of getting social ready video outside of the long form. But along with that, I'm also helping on the post end, whether it be helping source B-roll for the long form episode, help just with overall notes to get in a good enough place for release and for distribution. So that's something I do on the actual long form side. On days when I'm not doing that, or even the same day, I'm cutting up long forms into short form content, like we're kind of talking about, and trying to make it as engaging as possible for driving back to the long form once it does release. And I do that for a multitude of shows. So it'll be flipping through, a couple different pieces of boxing program that we have over to KG certified and basketball content that we have. So it's a lot of just shuffling and wearing different hats, right? So it's a lot of editing, it's a lot of programming, it's a lot of curating content and deciding, because that's the biggest part, right? At the very top of it is deciding what pieces of short form content will be the most engaging and draw the viewer back to the long form, right? We're just not going to push out clips to push out clips. We're pushing out
Mm,
clips to be engaging, to bring people back to the long form. So that's one of the biggest parts, is just having the forethought and kind of in a pre-production sense, having the forethought of what will perform, what people will connect with, and making sure that that's what we're cutting first and foremost. And then in terms of like a rollout for an episode, right? This kind of goes along with that. We're making sure that anything that's pushed at the start of an episode release and a rollout is the most engaging, is the most powerful, is the most, someone's going to watch it and connect with the guests and connect with our talent. So they go watch the long form. That's what it always comes back to. So they go watch the long form, right?
amazing.
So in a day, doing a lot of different things like that.
Brilliant. And talking business, Connor, in terms of expectations, what are some of the most important metrics for you with regards to the board or the management?
So the most important metrics are going to be growth metrics, right? So in terms of engagement on individual posts, right? It's great to look back and it's great to see the community really responding to something, whether that be through comments, through likes. That's all great, but at the end of the day, we want to see that convert to followers, right? So the follower metric to me is probably the most important, because that's just showing that we're continuing to evolve with the times and we're bringing new people in, right? Because for something like KG Certified and Taking the Truth, we do great engagement across almost everything we post. And a lot of that reason is because the followers and the audience we already have connect very well with Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett. They love it. They love listening to them talk ball. Like, they love every aspect of it. So that audience, we're always going to get engagement from. We're always going to get likes. We're always going to get comments, shares, all of that. Once we look past that superficial engagement, we really want to see under the hood that, our followers are growing 5%, over the last 30 days, 7% over the last 60 days. We want to see that, because what that means to us is we're being syndicated to people within, say, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, wherever. We're being syndicated to people who do not already follow us and who are enjoying the content enough that they click that follow button, right? It's just pulling in more people, more viewers, more audience that know that they'll like the content and will continue to watch the content in the future, which then comes back once those followers grow, comes back, and the superficial engagement of likes, comments, all that, we see that rise after the fact because now the audience is bigger. So that's what I would say is probably the most important. And then from a business perspective, it's the most important as well, because, as we continue to, whether it's sponsorship deals, whether it's, programming deals, whatever it is, they want to see that the audience is growing. The superficial numbers are great, but a year, 2 years from now, what's the audience going to look like? Is it still going to be 400,000 or maybe only 405,000? Like, that's not going to continue to grow those likes, those comments, and eventually the monetization that comes on the back end. That's not going to grow. It's going to stagnate at a certain point. So really, we just want to see the audience continue to grow for a myriad of reasons.
Absolutely. And excuse my ignorance, but what sort of formats are you engaged with? You're engaged with the socials. Is there also a cable element to this, or television, or
So for our company, we're partnered with DraftKings. So they have a network, DraftKings network, that a lot of our content also gets pushed to, but it's a forget what the term for it is, but it's just on like set top boxes, like Roku. It's not cable. It's like on Roku, Apple TV. It's app based. So that's that. Aside from that, our main focus is YouTube itself.
just sort of some fast channels and some, but mostly
Hmm.
YouTube, right?
Yep.
So I wanna ask you, how do you measure this conversion of followers on maybe the socials like TikToks and Instagrams, and how do you see that reflected on the views? Are the views the most important figures at the end of the day? Or is it ad revenue? Is it
It kind of depends how you want to look at it. For someone like me that came up as a creative, right? Like, and the business part of my mind is a little bit secondary because the way that I personally view it, which whether it's correct or wrong or indifferent, the way that I view it is the content's always king, and the content will drive that revenue, right? Like you can have lofty goals to make as much money as you humanly can, which is great, and which is the point of the business. But at the end of the day, that comes crashing down if the content doesn't stay fresh, if people aren't engaging with it, right? We've seen it all the time in past, whether it be a network, whether it be, shows being canceled. The reason why that happens is because they stop caring about the content, right? They start pushing it different ways and whatever, but they stop caring about the crux of why people are watching, which is the content. So for me personally, content's king, and that will always drive the revenue and everything else on the back end. So that's kind of where I like to think first and foremost.
right? And that's absolutely right. I agree. You're doing this for the audience. You need to. Sometimes we forget what when we're done it for so long, why people actually started watching in the first place. But Connor, in terms of revenue streams, what sort of revenue streams are you looking at? YouTube ad revenue, etc.
So yeah, we're mostly looking at YouTube ad revenue as well as various sponsorships that step in. And again, like the sponsorships step in because of the content we're producing. Whether it's a shoe reseller, a general shoe company, because obviously with basketball that's a big thing. Whether it's a boxing brand like a Box Raw, things like that. A lot of it is from you know YouTube AdSense as well as these sponsorships that we're bringing in.
Gotcha. What are some of the next 6 to 12 month goals with regards to building up on those sponsorships and YouTube AdSense and ad revenue?
The biggest thing is anybody's goal is to continue to grow and to continue to introduce new programming that can bring in new forms of audience, because once that starts to occur, once we start to kind of tap outside of our core audience right now and bring in new viewership, that will help kind of diversify what we're bringing in terms of sponsors, right? So we kind of have the crux of what we do, which is sports-based media, but that doesn't mean that there aren't people out there that don't consume what we're creating. There are millions of people that aren't consuming what we're creating. So the goal is to kind of continue to diversify within that sports media ourselves, whether that be introducing new programming, which we always have things in the pipeline, new ways of presenting the sports. Because, for example, we have two pieces of boxing programming right now. One is called Art of Ward with Andre Ward, which is more of your sit down style interview. Oprah, Barbara Walters, getting to the nitty gritty of whatever the guest is, their background, all of that. And then we have one that is a little bit more loose, right? It's a little bit more almost Gen Z ready to a degree, right? So it's continuing to create pieces of programming that at the heart of them is about the sport, is about what's going on in the sports world, but bringing in viewership and viewers who may not have consumed it originally because they might be younger, they might be older, they might be XYZ. So that will help us continue to bring in sponsors that react to that new crowd. So that's kind of the long-term goal.
Absolutely. Um, Again, great content will attract those the right
Exactly.
people. Um, but other than that, what other outreach methods do you use to touch base with some of those ideal sponsorships? So,
So for
mm,
yeah, so oh, for the sponsorships themselves.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so I don't touch this as much, but we have various, partnership managers who are looking at the demographics and who are looking at whatever it may be that helps them kind of pinpoint, oh, like, we have X% of our viewership is this gender from this part of the country. Oh, this regional sandwich shop, this regional whatever, they might relate back to that. So they're always looking at ways to relate the demographics and the audience numbers on the back end to different companies. And a lot of it too is whether it be our talent, whether it be our crew and staff, we have things that we like. And the easiest way to kind of attract these sponsorships and make it make sense for both sides, because we're not really into like making it not make sense for us. Like it has to be, a sponsor, a company that we kind of align with. Like one of the ways to do that is to listen to our talent, listen to our audience. What are other uh, talent from other, networks and whatnot? What do they like, right? Because it'll all relate back to our platform, our content, and what people will relate to as far as sponsorships. So that's a major part of it too, is listening, right? Listening to our talent, our staff, our audience, and using all three of those to reach out and see who would like to join. At the same time, there are sponsors that reach out to us directly for the same reason. As we continue to grow, as there's more eyes, they have their own sales teams, their own buy teams that are reaching out to us because they see something special in us and they see a way that they can reach our viewership. And it can be like there can be reciprocity there between our viewers and who's consuming their product.
Absolutely. Um, Brilliant stuff. And kind of what now becomes some of the most important things for you in the business? What matters more than anything else to you, and why?
Ooh, that's a good question. What matters the most to me is honestly making, this is going to sound kind of cheesy, but making our viewers happy. That's the biggest thing
Yeah.
to me. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be happiness, but evoking some sort of emotion from our viewers. That's what makes me feel the best about what I'm doing and what I'm creating. Because at the end of the day, like we've talked about this whole time, content is king and it's for the viewer. It's not for me. I'm not creating this for me. I'm creating it for the viewer, for them to enjoy, really, right? Because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
we all have things that we enjoy, whether it's sports, whether it's music, whether it's, movies, whatever it is, whatever you consume. What we're trying to do is open your eyes to the content that we have that you might find enjoyment in, or you might get information from, or you might learn, right? Like we have
Mm,
guests on our programming all the time that provide real teaching moments, whether it be about mental health, other real world issues, like things outside of the sport, right? And a lot of times, too, once we're able to capture those moments, we're then syndicating them across social to engage with more viewership to spread that message further. So, say it's something about mental health, right? Which is a huge issue right now
mhm.
in general, in the general public. It makes me feel good to be able to spread the message from someone that you may not have even thought had an issue because in your mind as an audience viewer, they make millions of dollars. Why are they dealing with issues that I may be dealing with, right? So stuff like
Mm,
that, evoking emotion, making people happy, making people aware that there are people like them, no matter how much money they make, or if they're an athlete, or if they're whatever, doesn't matter. Everybody's the same at the end of the day. Everybody's a human. And that's kind of what I like the best, is it kind of gives a way to like artificially connect with millions of people at a time, which is really cool to me.
amazing. I love it. Connor, with regards to your collaboration with management, who do you actually deal with the most, and what are their demands and and goals like?
So in terms of management, we, because like you mentioned at the top, this production company is an offshoot of the old Showtime Sports department that was shut down by Paramount, right? So these are people that I've been working with for years, and same managers that I've been working with for years, who from the very beginning we've had a very close relationship in terms of we have the similar goals, and we have a similar viewpoint of the content that we're creating and what we're doing for the larger sports community and larger audience. So I don't want to put it in words like it's very chill, but like there's a lot of open communication and there's a lot of ways that we bounce ideas off each other. Everybody's ears are always open. Nothing gets shut down. It's a space where myself, and I don't want to speak for everybody I work with, but I know that this is pretty much the same. It's a space where we feel comfortable to share ideas with someone that may be on the exec level. It doesn't matter. Everybody's always open. There's no fear of sharing ideas. There's no fear of something being struck down as being a stupid idea. So that's kind of how we've always operated since the Paramount days, and I owe that a lot to who was my SVP at Showtime and who spun this company off with Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson, Brian Daly. He's an incredible mentor, an incredible everything when it comes to just being open, being willing to hear. Nothing's dumb. He fully realizes like this world constantly, like we're talking about, adapts and develops into something new. It happens by the day. So there's no need to be stuck in a certain way. And that's kind of that openness and that comfortability has allowed us to ultimately continue to grow.
Yeah, I love this sort of work culture where this breeds creativity. I think it's easier said than done. It really needs to come from the upper management,
Hmm.
and they need to have a sense of tolerance and acceptance as well whenever ideas come across and they don't like it, right? They need to be open to it, and if they're not, this type of culture just cannot exist.
Yeah, because sometimes like creatives get stuck, right? Like creatives, you get stuck in a business model or underneath management that at the end of the day, they care only about numbers. And yeah, their job is to care about numbers and money being brought in, and that all makes perfect sense. But there is a degree of them accepting the creative for what we are and what we can provide and the ideas that we can help perpetuate. And that's kind of the culture that has been created at our production company. And like I said, has come from the old Showtime Sports, right? That's how it's been. That's how I know it always will be. And that's how I know we'll be successful because we're not stuck in the same thing, doing the same thing every day. We're allowed to be creative and to grow personally, which helps grow the business.
Absolutely. Connor, what are some of the biggest hurdles right now in the business, and what sort of worked and what hasn't in order to overcome these?
The biggest hurdle I would say is just oversaturation at this point. So our main piece of programming, which is in the name of the production company, All the Smoke, which is a humongous basketball podcast, one of the top sports podcasts in all of the world, right? When it was started 5, 6 years ago, it was really the first or second. I want to give Knuckleheads podcast a little hat tip here because they were really the first ones. We came shortly after. That was former athlete led, right? At the time, very, very innovative, right? These athletes who were just coming off of retirement decided that they want to share their stories and they want to talk with similar minded athletes. So you don't have like the nightly news or very formal broadcast interview style,
Mm,
right? It's
yeah,
peers interviewing peers, it's peers telling peers stories, which is
yeah,
awesome. Now, 5 years later, the athlete led media space is very, very saturated. There are tons of athletes who are creating their own podcasts, which is great. But at this point, it's become very saturated, whether it's in football, basketball, whatever. There are so many podcasts. And that's one of the biggest hurdles at this time is to continue to differentiate our content from these. I don't even want to look at them as competitors because we're all helping each other in a way. But for the sake of this conversation, competitors, it's kind of finding ways to differentiate our content from them to continue to grow our audience. Because why is our audience listening to us while they can listen to New Heights or Podcast P or whatever other number of current and former athletes have their podcasts? Why are they listening to us? And that's why we're constantly asking ourselves, why are they listening to us? How can we continue to make sure that they want to listen to us? How can we evolve with them and evolve with the media space so we can grow our audience, so we can retain the audience that we already have? So that's really the biggest hurdle right now. And there's no sign of it really slowing down. It's going to continue to get saturated. So we kind of have to be ahead of that curve and really think of ways to innovate and ways of distributing content that's different than all these other sports podcasts, athlete led sports podcasts.
absolutely. And this saturation, as you said, there's not the trend is still towards it.
Hmm.
And cutting through the noise is the challenge. And I think those that have already existed for this far and thus far, they they have existed through their creativity and engagement through the with the audience. And I think you can continue to do that, especially with the type of culture that you have. You allow pivots to happen. And I've had so many conversations where businesses have had these pivots and it's just been so successful for them. It doesn't necessarily mean you need a pivot, but it just means like today, the competition is just astounding and there needs to be something different happening in the market for sure. Great
You
point,
always have to
Connor.
be
Yeah.
open. You always have to be open to the
Mm,
pivot, right? Like you're saying,
absolutely.
like you don't have to take the pivot, but you always have to at least be open and keep your eyes open and aware that there are ways to go different directions.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Connor. This has actually been a masterclass on organic content and how to really manage today's time on socials and algorithms. So, thank you so much for your time, Connor. This has been lovely.
Thank you very much for having me on. I mean, this is important conversations to have, so I really, really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Connor. All right, let me hit the pause. Thank you so much, Connor.
Great
Appreciate it.
conversation, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I really appreciate you, man. Thank you for your time. Thank you for this conversation. Really, this time, especially this marketing and content age, it's just difficult. Like
It really
today,
is.
the conversation we've had today is not going to be the same one we have in another couple of months.
Nope, nope, not at all. It's just constantly changing, and keeping up in of itself is a job.
It
Constantly
really
keeping
is.
up with everything that's going on. So
So
it's tough, but
imagine,
it's rewarding. So
absolutely, imagine if you took like half a year off, maybe traveling and off of your work for your wedding, and coming back and you just
yeah.
well, okay, YouTube's changed its layout. Okay,
Hmm.
so the analytics are different now. Like obviously you'll be able to get back in, but it'll take you a moment.
Yeah, and that's the craziest part too. I know we touched on this, but like just YouTube specifically, where it's like you find out now this type of thumbnail style or changing your thumbnail every
Yes.
week or like the practice always changes. It's the same thing with Instagram where they'll be
Yeah.
like, "Oh, now it's good to have reels that are 90 seconds or less, but to mix in carousels and swipe throughs as well, and that will keep your content fresh inside of the algorithm." And they constantly change that. It'll be next month they'll be like, "Oh no, this is a better way to do it. This is how our algorithm's working now." Like nothing stays the same, which is cool because it allows us to change our stuff, but it's
I agree. I
head
agree.
spinning.
I agree. And part of your job is just 90% of your job is just being adaptive.
Yeah, 100%.
A
100%.
sponge. Actual
Yeah.
sponge. Just keeping, I think half of it's like keeping tabs on Mr. Beast and seeing what is up to.
that that like that's the biggest thing is like there's so much to be learned from like the top creators because they're top for a reason. And like Mr.
Yeah,
Beast is the perfect example. Like what he's figured out and what he's been able to do. And like at this point, I don't even know if this is true, but the way that I view him, especially on YouTube, is he drives a lot of what YouTube does on their back end. And that's just like kind of what I think. Like
interesting.
a lot of the new practices and a lot of the things that he
Interesting.
institutes, whether it be like the thumbnail thing. The thumbnail thing I
Yeah,
mentioned, I had learned from him. Like he will change thumbnails on videos
yeah,
every
yeah, that's
three
fine.
days,
Yeah,
and it's to
exactly.
recirculate in the algorithm. And I kind of think that YouTube at this point almost looks to him and other top content creators, and they kind of bend their algorithms and bend the way that they
Yeah.
view content on the back end based on what he's doing, based on what they're doing. So
And I bet when
it's
he sends
crazy.
a message to them, they listen. Yeah.
Exactly. It's nuts. It's nuts.
Yeah. Well, this has been lovely, Connor. And actually, there was something I wanted to talk to you about because as you were talking about really converting those followers, building a following ship and through those sponsorships as well, building that revenue, it got me thinking because we actually help media production companies to lift their revenue and profitability by finding those high value sponsorships. So I'm not sure this is a fit just yet. We may not be able to help you, but would it make sense to have like another 30 to 40-minute call to dive a little bit deeper into the business and see if we might be able to have help right there?
Sure, it doesn't hurt to, for
Yeah, I
sure.
think so because There's there as you mentioned, this is a saturated market. You need to have other ways to really find those really ideal sponsorships. And I didn't really get to ask you who are those really ideal sponsorships because obviously you need that alignment on screen as well. So who are they?
Yeah, so we're partnered with DraftKings, and so they will actually help. And that's the reason why it might not be the biggest fit is just because DraftKings really helps drive like their sponsorship arm and their sales arm really helps drive who we're bringing in. So a lot of like what we bring in is like StockX, which is shoe reseller, right? Because
Yeah,
basketball specifically, basketball is obviously huge with sneakers and sneaker culture. So
yeah,
StockX is a big one who's on board right now. In the past, some of these might be expired at this point, but typical like Coors Light, Manscaped, um, DoorDash. We're doing an activation soon with Jimmy John's. So like a lot of this, like think about sports and like the audience members of sports and what they'll be consuming, whether it be food, whether it be drink, whether it be experiences. A lot of it kind of centers around that, right? So like, March Madness is starting tomorrow, right? Doing an activation with Jimmy John's because people are going to sit in front of their TV and they're going to want to drink Coors Light, order DoorDash, eat Jimmy John's. They're going to see like, oh, this person's wearing a sick pair of Kobe sixes. Let me go check out StockX. So that's kind
yeah,
of like what kind of creating an ecosystem of different sponsorships that makes sense because that's kind of what I mentioned when we were chatting before is it ultimately has to make sense for us and for our viewership and for our
absolutely.
talent. Like we're not going to peddle stuff that we wouldn't use or make sense. So, and then on the boxing
Yeah,
side, it's the same kind of thing. Like a lot of boxers use Box Raw, which is a very popular apparel brand, whether it be sweatsuits or stuff like that. So they've sponsored us in the past for the same reason, right? It's something that the fans and people who are watching will relate back to.
absolutely. Well, here's something we could do. Like, would you be opposed to bringing on a partnership manager one in your company and so that we can have this chat and see what they might be needing in terms of the right sponsorships.
Yeah, I don't mind doing that. I might actually connect you with our partnership manager. That might be the best way, so you can have that conversation with her.
Yeah,
Just because it would probably make the most sense to have it with her. Because, like I mentioned,
absolutely.
like I'm in terms of the partnerships, I touch them when it comes to implementation into our content, right? So I'm not having the direct calls with partners and whatnot, but as it's like, okay, we need to insert this, that, and the other thing to fulfill whatever it is, that's where kind of I come in. So it would be best to connect you with my partnership manager.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would make sense. And but I'd argue you have a very big control over the revenue and the direction the company takes in terms of growth for sure, Connor. And sometimes it's overlooked what you literally bring in the sponsorships, right? So
I like to think that the content really
yeah,
drives it and really helps. Yeah,
yeah,
for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, absolutely. So all right, let's book in a date, and if you're available in that call, that would be great. Otherwise, we can definitely just have it with the partnership
Okay, why don't,
uh
why don't you send me an email
managers.
after this and I'll loop in my manager and we can figure out a time.
Sweet as that works. Yeah, I can do that straight after this. Um,
Perfect.
Other than that, lovely conversation, Connor, and I look forward to speaking again. If you're possible, we can have, both of us can jump on the next call as well.
Really appreciate it, man. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Cheers and
All right.
enjoy
All
your
right.
wedding.
Thank you very much. And keep me updated with
Thanks.
with all the Beyond the Lens releases and stuff like that too.
I forgot to mention, I will be sending you clips from this
Perfect.
conversation. There were
Awesome.
amazing insights. So I'm
Thank
sure
you.
everyone's, especially your followers, are going to love this as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the well wishes for my wedding and everything. Thank you again.
It's such a special time, honestly. I only just got my first wedding anniversary about a month ago.
Congratulations.
So yeah, thank you. And it is special. Weddings time, like it's one of the most important decisions you'll make in your life.
Hmm.
Like
For sure.
it is special. So take your time and enjoy the moments before the wedding.
For
Yeah.
sure. For sure.
All
Well,
right.
thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Connor. Enjoy it. See
Bye.
you later. Bye bye.